Let us begin where all wisdom begins, with an honest look in the mirror. 500 years ago, in the bustling city-states of Renaissance Italy, a man named Niccolò Machiavelli sat in exile, watching the world burn around him while princes and merchants played their deadly games of power. From his small study, surrounded by the ruins of his political career, he penned observations that would echo through the centuries, reaching us today with the clarity of freshly struck bronze. You see, Machiavelli understood something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The world is not a fairy tale. It is not governed by the rules we learned in Sunday school or the platitudes we see embroidered on throw pillows. The world is governed by power, its acquisition, its maintenance, and its strategic deployment. And those who understand this fundamental truth, who learn to navigate it with skill and wisdom, are the ones who shape the future rather than being shaped by it. Today, as you listen to these words, you stand at the same crossroads that every ambitious soul has faced throughout history. You can choose to remain naive about the nature of power, hoping that merit alone will carry you forward, or you can learn what Machiavelli knew, that success belongs to those who master the delicate art of strategic influence. This is not about becoming a tyrant or a manipulator in the crude sense. This is about understanding the hidden architecture of human behavior, the invisible forces that move people to action, and the timeless principles that separate leaders from followers, victors from victims, masters from servants. Before we can discuss the mechanics of influence, we must first understand the raw material we are working with, human nature itself. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived." This sounds harsh, perhaps, but consider it through the lens of compassion rather than cynicism. People are not inherently foolish, they are inherently hopeful. They want to believe in simple solutions, in the goodness of others, in the promise that tomorrow will be better than today. This hope, this beautiful human tendency toward optimism, creates predictable patterns of behavior that the wise can learn to recognize and work with, rather than against. Think of the last time you made a significant purchase, perhaps a car, a home, or even a smartphone. Did you buy it purely based on objective specifications and cost-benefit analysis? Of course not. You bought it because someone, somewhere in the marketing chain, understood that you needed to feel intelligent, successful, loved, or secure. They recognized your hope, your aspiration, your secret vision of who you could become, and they positioned their product as the bridge between who you are and who you wish to be. This is Machiavellian thinking at its finest, not the manipulation of the weak, but the recognition of universal human drives and the strategic positioning of yourself as the means to fulfill those drives. Modern neuroscience confirms what Machiavelli observed through pure intuition. Our brains are not the rational, calculating machines we pretend they are. We are driven by emotion first. Then we construct logical justifications for our emotional decisions afterward. The prefrontal cortex, our seat of rational thought, is constantly overruled by the limbic system, our emotional center. Understanding this is not about exploiting people's weaknesses. It is about speaking to their strengths in a language they can actually hear and respond to. Machiavelli's genius lay not in inventing new forms of cruelty, as his detractors suggest, but in understanding the concept of strategic positioning. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." This is not an endorsement of deception, but a recognition of a fundamental truth about human perception. We live in an age of information overload, where the average person encounters thousands of messages, faces, and decisions every single day. In this environment, positioning is not about lying, it is about clarity. It is about understanding that people will form impressions of you within seconds, and those impressions will determine whether they see you as someone worth following, someone worth fearing, someone worth respecting, or someone worth ignoring. Consider Steve Jobs, a master of Machiavellian positioning. He understood that in the technology industry, being seen as an innovator was more valuable than being seen as an engineer. While his competitors focused on technical specifications and feature lists, Jobs positioned Apple as the choice of creative rebels, of people who think different. He recognized that people do not buy products, they buy identity. They do not choose features, they choose the story they want to tell about themselves. This principle applies whether you are leading a team of 5 or managing a corporation of 50,000. Your success depends not just on your actual capabilities, but on how clearly and compellingly you can communicate those capabilities to others. The most brilliant engineer in the world will be passed over for promotion if they cannot position themselves as leadership material. The most insightful consultant will lose clients to competitors who present their ideas with greater clarity and confidence. The key insight here is that positioning is not about pretending to be something you are not. It is about presenting the best version of who you already are in a way that resonates with what others need and want. It is about understanding that perception shapes reality, and that managing perception is therefore a fundamental responsibility of anyone who seeks to lead or influence others. Perhaps Machiavelli's most famous observation is that it is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. But this statement has been grotesquely misunderstood for centuries. Machiavelli was not advocating for cruelty or tyranny. He was making a subtle point about the psychology of human loyalty and the mechanics of sustainable influence. Love, in the political sense, is fickle. It is based on what you have done for someone lately. It evaporates the moment you fail to meet expectations or when someone else offers a better deal. Fear, properly understood, is not about terrorizing people. It is about establishing clear, consistent consequences for actions. It is about creating predictability in an unpredictable world. The best leaders combine both elements strategically. They are loved for their vision, their charisma, their ability to inspire hope and excitement about the future. But they are also feared, not for their cruelty, but for their competence, their unwavering standards, their refusal to accept mediocrity or betrayal. Consider the legendary football coach Vince Lombardi. His players loved him because he made them champions, because he saw potential in them that they could not see in themselves, because he transformed ordinary men into legends. But they also feared him, not because he was cruel, but because he demanded excellence from every player, every day, in every practice. They knew that disappointing Coach Lombardi was not an option, not because he would punish them arbitrarily, but because his standards were absolute and his judgment was fair. In the modern workplace, this translates to being the leader who genuinely cares about your team's growth and success, while simultaneously maintaining clear expectations and consistent accountability. Your employees should love working for you because you make them better at their jobs, because you fight for their advancement, because you create an environment where they can do their best work. But they should also understand that mediocrity, dishonesty, or disloyalty will have swift and certain consequences. This balance, what we might call compassionate firmness, is the hallmark of leaders who create lasting influence rather than temporary compliance. Machiavelli wrote, "A prince must imitate the fox and the lion, because the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. Therefore, it is necessary to be a fox to discover the traps and a lion to terrify the wolves." This metaphor contains the entire secret of strategic adaptability. The lion represents strength, courage, direct action, the ability to face challenges head-on and overpower opposition through sheer force of will and capability. The fox represents cunning, intelligence, the ability to see around corners and navigate complex situations through wit rather than might. Most people gravitate toward one approach or the other. They are either all lion, charging forward with brute force, intimidating through aggression, solving every problem with more intensity, or all fox, scheming and maneuvering, trying to outsmart every situation, avoiding direct confrontation at all costs. But mastery requires both. There are situations where only the lion's approach will work, where you must take a stand, draw a line in the sand, and be willing to fight for what you believe in. And there are situations where only the fox's approach will succeed, where you must navigate political complexities, build coalitions, and achieve your objectives through indirect means. Amazon's Jeff Bezos exemplified this principle throughout his career. When competitors tried to undercut Amazon's prices, he responded like a lion, matching their prices and then going lower, even at a loss, until they could no longer compete. He was willing to sacrifice short-term profits for long-term market dominance, and he had the strength and resources to sustain that strategy longer than anyone else. But when dealing with regulators, with internal politics, with complex partnership negotiations, Bezos operated like a fox. He understood that direct confrontation would only invite more scrutiny and regulation. Instead, he positioned Amazon as a champion of consumers, as an engine of innovation, as a company that was making life better for ordinary people. He navigated the complex political landscape by making himself indispensable rather than threatening. The key insight is that your approach must match the situation, not your personality or your comfort zone. Sometimes you must be the lion, decisive, powerful, unwavering in your convictions. Sometimes you must be the fox, patient, strategic, willing to take the long way around if it leads to a better destination. No one achieves dominance alone. Even the most autocratic rulers depend on networks of supporters, advisors, and lieutenants. Machiavelli understood that sustainable power is not about controlling every detail directly, but about creating systems and relationships that advance your interests even when you are not present. He wrote, "He who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner affects his ruin than his preservation." This means that idealistic thinking about how relationships should work must give way to realistic thinking about how relationships actually work. People are motivated primarily by their own interests. This is not cynicism. It is simply recognition of a fundamental truth. The art of building alliances lies in aligning other people's interests with your own, creating situations where helping you is the same as helping themselves. Consider how Franklin Roosevelt built the coalition that would eventually defeat fascism in World War II. He did not appeal to abstract principles of democracy or freedom. He appealed to each nation's specific interests. To the British, he offered the promise of American industrial might and resources. To the Soviets, he offered a second front that would relieve pressure on the Eastern Front. To smaller nations, he offered protection from domination by larger powers. Each ally had different reasons for joining the coalition, but all of their interests aligned around the central objective of defeating the Axis powers. Roosevelt understood that sustainable alliances are not built on shared values or personal friendships, but on shared interests and mutual benefit. In your own sphere, whether you are managing a team, building a business, or advancing in your career, the same principle applies. The people who will support you most consistently are those who benefit most clearly from your success. Your job is not to convince them to like you personally, but to make your success essential to their own success. This means understanding what each person in your network really wants, not what they say they want, but what their actions reveal they want. It means structuring relationships and opportunities so that supporting you is the rational choice, not just the emotional choice. One of Machiavelli's most subtle insights was understanding the power of momentum and the perception of inevitability. He observed that people naturally gravitate toward winners, not out of shallow opportunism, but out of a deep psychological need to be on the right side of history. When people believe that your success is inevitable, they begin to act in ways that make your success actually inevitable. They anticipate your needs. They clear obstacles from your path. They position themselves to benefit from your rise rather than to obstruct it. This is why Machiavelli advised rulers to act decisively and with confidence, even when facing uncertainty. It is better to commit fully to a course of action that might be wrong than to hesitate and signal uncertainty about your own chances of success. Modern research in social psychology confirms this insight through the concept of social proof. When people are uncertain about how to behave in a situation, they look to others for cues. If they see that other people are supporting you, following you, betting on your success, they become more likely to do the same. This creates what we might call a success spiral. Early supporters attract more supporters, which attracts even more supporters until the momentum becomes genuinely unstoppable. But how do you create this initial momentum when you are starting from zero? Machiavelli would say that you begin by choosing your battles carefully. You focus your efforts on areas where you can achieve clear, visible victories that demonstrate your capability and build your reputation. You also understand the importance of timing. There are moments when systems are in flux, when the old order is breaking down and people are looking for new leadership. These moments of transition are when influence can be built most rapidly, because people are actively seeking someone to follow rather than clinging to existing authorities. The key is to recognize these moments and position yourself not as someone who is seeking power, but as someone who is the natural solution to the problems people are facing. You become inevitable not by declaring your inevitability, but by making yourself indispensable. Most people view uncertainty as something to be eliminated or hidden. Machiavelli understood it as a tool to be wielded strategically. He wrote, "Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved." But he also understood that the most powerful position is not to be entirely predictable in either direction. Complete predictability makes you easy to counter, easy to work around, easy to take for granted. Strategic unpredictability keeps others slightly off balance and forces them to remain attentive to your actions and reactions. This does not mean being erratic or inconsistent in your core principles. Your values, your standards, your fundamental commitment should be absolutely clear and reliable. But your methods, your timing, and your specific responses to particular situations can and should retain an element of unpredictability. Consider how Apple under Steve Jobs used this principle. The company's commitment to design excellence and user experience was completely predictable. You always knew that Apple would prioritize elegance and simplicity over technical specifications or cost efficiency. But the specific products, the timing of announcements, the details of strategy were carefully guarded secrets that kept competitors guessing and customers in a state of anticipation. This strategic uncertainty also applies to negotiation and relationship management. If people can predict exactly how you will respond to every situation, they can manipulate those responses to their advantage. But if they understand your principles while remaining uncertain about your tactics, they must treat you with greater respect and caution. The key is to be unpredictable in your methods while remaining utterly reliable in your character. People should know that you will always act with integrity, that you will honor your commitments, that you will treat them fairly, but they should never be quite sure how you will achieve these objectives in any particular situation. In Machiavelli's time, the scarcest resource was often gold or territory or military strength. In our time, the scarcest resource is attention. Everyone is competing for the same limited pool of human focus, and those who understand how to capture and direct attention are those who wield the greatest influence. Machiavelli understood that perception often matters more than reality, not because people are stupid, but because people can only act on the information they actually receive and process. In an age of information overload, the ability to cut through noise and communicate clearly becomes a form of power in itself. This means that part of mastering influence is mastering communication, not just the content of your message, but the timing, the medium, the context, and the emotional resonance of how you deliver that message. Consider how successful politicians use this principle. They do not try to communicate everything they know about every issue. Instead, they identify 2 or 3 key themes that embody their core message, and they return to those themes consistently in different contexts, with different examples, until those themes become associated with their identity in the public mind. The same principle applies in business, in leadership, and in personal relationships. People cannot and will not remember everything you say, but they will remember how you made them feel, and they will remember the core themes that you consistently reinforce through your words and actions. This means being strategic about when you speak and when you remain silent, when you reveal information and when you withhold it, when you engage in public discourse and when you operate behind the scenes. It also means understanding that in the modern attention economy, being ignored is worse than being opposed. Opposition at least indicates that your ideas are significant enough to warrant a response. Indifference suggests that you have failed to break through the noise entirely. Perhaps, no quality is more misunderstood in our instant gratification culture than the art of strategic patience. Machiavelli wrote, "Whoever wishes to foresee the future must consult the past, for human events ever resemble those of preceding times." This observation contains a profound insight about the nature of time and strategy. Most people focus on immediate problems and immediate solutions, but those who achieve lasting dominance think strategically. They understand that real change happens slowly, that sustainable influence is built incrementally, and that the most important victories are often invisible until they are complete. Strategic patience is not passive waiting. It is active preparation. It is understanding that there are seasons in every endeavor, times for planting, times for cultivation, and times for harvest. It is recognizing that attempting to force results prematurely often destroys the very outcomes you are trying to achieve. Warren Buffett exemplifies this principle in the investment world. While other investors chase quarterly earnings and daily stock movements, Buffett thinks in decades. He identifies companies with sustainable competitive advantages, invests in them when they are undervalued, and then holds those investments for years or even decades, allowing compound interest and business growth to create extraordinary returns. But Buffett's patience is not passive. During the waiting periods, he is constantly studying, constantly learning, and constantly positioning himself to recognize and act on the next great opportunity. His patience is a form of active intelligence gathering and preparation. The same principle applies to building influence and achieving dominance in any field. You must be willing to make investments today that will not pay off for months or years. You must be willing to build relationships before you need them, to develop capabilities before they are required, to position yourself for opportunities that do not yet exist. This requires a fundamental shift in how you measure progress. Instead of focusing only on immediate results, you must learn to track leading indicators, the small signals that suggest you are moving in the right direction, even when the ultimate outcome is not yet visible. Machiavelli observed that crisis reveals character more clearly than any other circumstance. He wrote, "Never was anything great achieved without danger. This is not because danger is inherently valuable, but because crisis creates conditions where ordinary rules are suspended and extraordinary leadership becomes possible. Most people experience crisis as something that happens to them, an external force that disrupts their plans and threatens their security. But masters of influence understand crisis as an opportunity, a moment when the established order becomes fluid and new possibilities emerge. This does not mean creating crises artificially or taking unnecessary risks. It means developing the capability to remain calm and strategic when others are panicking, to see opportunities when others see only threats, to make decisions quickly and confidently when others are paralyzed by uncertainty. Consider how Winston Churchill used the crisis of World War II to establish himself as one of history's greatest leaders. Before the war, Churchill was seen as an aging politician whose best days were behind him. But when Britain faced its darkest hour, his ability to remain resolute, to communicate hope in the face of despair, and to make difficult decisions without flinching, transformed him into an icon of leadership. The key insight is that crisis does not create leadership. It reveals leadership that was already present but perhaps not yet recognized. The qualities that make you effective during normal times, strategic thinking and clear communication, the ability to build relationships and manage complexity, become exponentially more valuable during periods of uncertainty and change. This means that preparing for crisis is not about stockpiling resources or building defensive walls. It is about developing the internal capabilities that will allow you to thrive when external circumstances become challenging. It is about cultivating emotional resilience so that you can remain calm when others are emotional. It is about developing strategic thinking skills so that you can see patterns and possibilities when others see only chaos. It is about building strong relationships and communication skills so that you can rally support and coordinate action when others are focused only on their own survival. Machiavelli understood that loyalty cannot be demanded or purchased. It must be earned through consistent demonstration of competence and care. He wrote, "Men willingly believe what they wish," but he also understood that sustainable loyalty is based on results, not just promises. True loyalty is not blind obedience or personal affection. It is rational commitment based on mutual benefit and demonstrated reliability. People become loyal to leaders who make them more successful, who protect their interests, who help them achieve their own goals. This means that building loyalty requires understanding what each person in your sphere actually wants and needs, not what you think they should want or what you would want in their position. It requires consistent delivery on your commitments, even small ones, because people judge your reliability based on patterns of behavior, not isolated incidents. It also requires understanding the difference between loyalty and compliance. Compliance is what you get through authority, hierarchy, and coercion. People comply because they have to, but they will abandon you the moment they have better options or less to lose. Loyalty is what you get through demonstrated value and mutual respect. People remain loyal because they choose to, because they believe that your success serves their interests better than any available alternative. Building this kind of loyalty requires genuine investment in other people's success. It means promoting people who work for you and recognizing their contributions publicly, taking responsibility for failures while sharing credit for successes. It means being willing to make short-term sacrifices for the long-term benefit of your relationships and your reputation. Most importantly, it means understanding that loyalty flows both ways. If you expect others to be loyal to you, you must demonstrate loyalty to them. You must be willing to defend them when they are under attack, to support them when they face challenges, to invest in their growth even when it is not immediately profitable for you. Your reputation is your most valuable asset and your most vulnerable liability. Machiavelli understood that reputation operates according to different rules than other forms of capital. It takes years to build but can be destroyed in moments. It multiplies the impact of everything else you do, and it is largely beyond your direct control once it is established. This is why managing reputation requires a completely different approach than managing other aspects of your career or business. You cannot build reputation through marketing or public relations alone. Reputation is built through consistent patterns of behavior over extended periods of time witnessed and validated by people whose opinions carry weight in your field. But reputation is not just about being well regarded. Different types of reputation serve different strategic purposes. In some contexts, you want to be known for reliability and stability. In others, you want to be known for innovation and risk-taking. In some situations, you want to be seen as collaborative and easy to work with. In others, you want to be seen as demanding and uncompromising. The key is understanding what type of reputation serves your long-term strategic objectives, and then aligning your actions and communications to build that specific reputation deliberately and consistently. This requires thinking about reputation as an investment portfolio. Just as you would diversify financial investments across different assets and time horizons, you must build different aspects of your reputation across different audiences and contexts. With your team, you might want to be known as a leader who develops talent and creates opportunities for advancement. With your peers, you might want to be known as someone who delivers results and can be trusted with important assignments. With senior executives, you might want to be known as a strategic thinker who understands the big picture and can execute complex initiatives. Each of these reputational goals requires different behaviors and different communication strategies, but they must all be authentic expressions of your core values and capabilities. The moment people sense that your reputation is artificial or manipulated, it becomes not just worthless, but actively harmful. Individual brilliance can create moments of success, but sustainable dominance requires building systems that work independently of your personal involvement. Machiavelli understood that the greatest leaders are not those who do everything themselves, but those who create structures and processes that continue to advance their objectives even in their absence. This is perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of strategic thinking, moving beyond personal effectiveness to organizational effectiveness, beyond individual influence to institutional power. Consider how Ray Kroc built McDonald's into a global empire. Kroc understood that the key to scalable success was not creating the best hamburger, but creating the best system for producing consistent hamburgers. He developed detailed processes, training programs, quality controls, and performance metrics that allow thousands of individual franchise owners to deliver a standardized experience without requiring his personal oversight. The same principle applies whether you are managing a small team or building a large organization. Your influence becomes sustainable when it is embedded in systems rather than dependent on your constant personal attention. This means developing other people's capabilities so that they can handle responsibilities that currently require your involvement. It means creating processes and procedures that ensure consistent results regardless of who is performing the work. It means building communication systems that keep information flowing even when you are not present to facilitate every conversation. Most importantly, it means understanding that building systems requires different skills than operating within systems. You must learn to think like an architect, not just a craftsman, to design structures that will support the outcomes you want, rather than just executing tasks that produce immediate results. One of Machiavelli's most counterintuitive insights was that the tighter you grip something, the more likely it is to slip through your fingers. True control comes not from micromanagement or authoritarian oversight, but from creating conditions where others choose to act in ways that serve your objectives. This paradox appears in every domain of human activity. Parents, who try to control every aspect of their children's lives, often raise rebellious teenagers. Managers who micromanage their employees often create passive, dependent teams that cannot function without constant supervision. Organizations that try to control every detail of their market often become slow and inflexible, unable to adapt to changing conditions. The alternative is what we might call indirect control, creating systems and incentives, relationships that naturally guide behavior in the directions you want without requiring constant intervention. Google exemplifies this principle in how it manages its workforce. Rather than trying to control how employees spend every hour of their day, Google creates an environment where talented people want to work, gives them challenging problems to solve, and provides them with the resources and autonomy they need to excel. The result is a level of innovation and productivity that can never be achieved through traditional command and control management. The key insight is that people resist being controlled but welcome being empowered. They resist being told what to do, but embrace opportunities to achieve something meaningful, and they resist arbitrary restrictions, but accept necessary constraints that serve a larger purpose they believe in. This means that effective influence requires understanding what people actually want, not just what they say they want, but what their actions reveal they value, and then positioning yourself as the means to help them achieve those things. Throughout his writings, Machiavelli returns again and again to the theme of balance, the need to integrate seemingly contradictory qualities and strategies depending on the situation and the objectives. Be generous, but not wasteful. Be feared, but not hated. Be flexible, but not unprincipled. Be patient, but not passive. Be confident, but not arrogant. Be strategic, but not manipulative. This is not moral relativism or situational ethics. It is recognition that human affairs are complex, that different circumstances require different approaches, and that rigid adherence to any single principle or strategy will eventually lead to failure. The highest level of strategic thinking involves what we might call dynamic balance, the ability to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously, to see situations from different angles, and to adapt your approach based on changing conditions while maintaining consistency in your core values and objectives. This requires developing what psychologists call cognitive complexity, the ability to process contradictory information, to see nuance and ambiguity in situations that others view as black and white, and to make decisions based on multiple criteria rather than simple rules. It also requires emotional maturity, the ability to remain calm and strategic when others are emotional, to see long-term consequences when others are focused on immediate reactions, and to make decisions based on what is effective rather than what feels good in the moment. Most importantly, it requires understanding that mastery in any domain involves transcending the either-or thinking that dominates most people's approach to problems. Instead of asking whether you should be tough or compassionate, direct or subtle, patient or aggressive, you learn to ask when and how to be each of these things in service of your larger objectives. Now, let us bring these timeless principles into the realities of your daily life. The boardrooms and coffee shops where you operate may seem far removed from the Renaissance courts that Machiavelli observed, but human nature remains remarkably consistent across centuries and cultures. In your workplace, whether you are leading a team or seeking advancement, these principles translate into practical strategies. You build influence not by trying to be everyone's friend, but by consistently delivering results that make others successful. You navigate office politics not by avoiding them, but by understanding the underlying interests and motivations that drive them. When you enter negotiations, whether for salary, contracts, or resources, you prepare not just by knowing your own position, but by understanding what the other party really needs and how you can position yourself as the solution to their problems. In your personal relationships, you build loyalty not through constant reassurance or gifts, but through consistent demonstration of reliability and care. You create attraction not by trying to be perfect, but by being genuinely confident in your own value and purpose. In your community involvement, whether in professional associations, volunteer organizations, or civic groups, you build reputation by taking on meaningful responsibilities and delivering exceptional results, not by simply showing up or expressing good intentions. The key insight that runs through all of these applications is that sustainable influence is always built on genuine value creation. The techniques and strategies we have discussed are not shortcuts or tricks. They are ways of understanding and working with human nature to create outcomes that benefit everyone involved. Before we conclude, we must address the moral dimension of these ideas. Machiavelli has been misunderstood for centuries as an advocate of ruthless cynicism, but his actual message is more nuanced and ultimately more ethical than his critics suggest. The fundamental ethical question is not whether you will have influence over others. If you interact with other human beings, you already do. The question is whether you will wield that influence consciously and responsibly, or unconsciously and carelessly. Understanding the principles we have discussed does not make you manipulative. It makes you aware of the manipulation that is already happening all around you, every day, in every interaction. It gives you the tools to recognize when others are trying to influence you inappropriately, and it helps you understand how to influence others in ways that serve legitimate purposes. The highest ethical use of these principles is in service of something larger than yourself, building organizations that create value, developing people's capabilities, solving problems that matter, creating positive change in your community or field. Machiavelli himself understood this. His ultimate objective was not personal power for its own sake, but the creation of stable, prosperous societies that can protect their citizens and contribute to human flourishing. He recognized that achieving these noble objectives often required the use of methods that were not themselves noble, and he argued that leaders had a responsibility to master these methods in service of their higher purposes. The same principle applies to you. If you have important work to do, if you have people depending on you, If you have contributions to make that could benefit others, then you have a responsibility to be as effective as possible in achieving those objectives. This means understanding how influence really works, not how you wish it worked or how it works in idealized scenarios. As we near the end of our journey together, I want you to understand something crucial about the nature of mastery itself. These principles do not work like switches that you can turn on and off. They work like compound interest, small and consistent applications that create momentum over time into extraordinary results. When you first begin applying these ideas, the changes will be subtle. People may not immediately recognize that anything has shifted in how you operate. But over time, as you become more skilled at reading situations, more strategic in your approaches, and more consistent in your results, others will begin to see you differently. They will start coming to you with their most challenging problems because they trust your judgment. They will seek your advice on important decisions because they respect your perspective, and they will include you in conversations and opportunities that were previously closed to you because you have demonstrated value that goes beyond your formal role or title. This is how real influence is built, not through dramatic gestures or overnight transformations, but through the gradual accumulation of trust, respect, and demonstrated capability. The key is patience with the process while maintaining urgency about improvement. Every interaction is an opportunity to practice these principles. Every challenge is a chance to demonstrate your growing mastery, and every relationship is a long-term investment in your influence and effectiveness. Most people give up too early because they expect immediate results from strategic changes. But the most powerful applications of these principles often take months or years to fully manifest. The person who commits to this path of development, who continues applying these ideas even when the results are not immediately visible, is the person who eventually achieves the kind of influence and success that others can only wonder about. We began this journey with Machiavelli sitting in his study, watching the world change around him while contemplating the eternal patterns of human behavior. We end it with you, sitting wherever you are, equipped with insights that have survived 5 centuries because they are based on truths about human nature that do not change. The world you inhabit is different from Machiavelli's in its technology, its scale, and its complexity. But it is identical in the fundamental dynamics that determine who rises and who falls, who influences and who is influenced, who shapes events and who is shaped by them. You now understand that success is not a matter of luck or natural talent alone. It is a matter of understanding the hidden architecture of human motivation and positioning yourself strategically within that architecture. You have learned that leadership is not about having all the answers, but about asking the right questions and helping others find solutions that serve everyone's interests. You understand that reputation is built through consistent actions over time, not through marketing or self-promotion. Most importantly, you have learned that mastery is not a destination, but a journey, a commitment to continuous learning and continuous adaptation, continuous refinement of your understanding and your capabilities. The blueprint we have explored together is not a rigid formula to be applied mechanically, but a flexible framework for thinking strategically about influence and leadership. Each situation you encounter will require you to adapt these principles to new circumstances, to find creative applications that serve your specific objectives and context. Some days you will need to be the lion, bold, decisive, willing to confront challenges directly and accept the risks of leadership. Other days you will need to be the fox, patient, subtle, working behind the scenes to build coalitions and navigate complex politics. The wisdom lies in knowing which approach serves your larger purposes in any given moment. As you integrate these ideas into your daily life, remember that strategic thinking is like physical fitness. It requires regular practice to maintain and improve. Every day presents opportunities to observe human behavior more carefully, to notice the patterns of influence operating around you, to experiment with different approaches and learn from the results. Start by becoming a more careful observer of the dynamics in your current environment. Notice who has influence and how they use it. Pay attention to which approaches work and which ones backfire. Study the leaders you admire and try to understand the specific behaviors and strategies that make them effective. Practice reading situations more deeply. When conflicts arise, instead of just reacting emotionally, step back and ask yourself what interests are really at stake, what each party actually needs, how the situation could be resolved in a way that serves everyone's legitimate objectives. Experiment with different communication styles depending on your audience and objectives. Notice how people respond when you emphasize logic versus emotion, when you speak directly versus indirectly, when you position yourself as an expert versus a collaborator. Build your strategic patience by identifying long-term objectives that are important to you, then breaking them down into incremental steps that you can take consistently over time. Learn to measure progress by leading indicators rather than just immediate results. Most importantly, practice the art of strategic empathy, the ability to understand other people's perspectives, motivations, and constraints so thoroughly that you can predict their behavior and position yourself accordingly. This is not about becoming manipulative, but about becoming genuinely helpful in ways that also serve your own interests. As we close this exploration together, feel the weight and promise of what lies ahead. You are not the same person who began listening to these words. You now carry insights that most people never develop, tools that most people never master, and perspectives that will serve you for the rest of your life. The blueprint is complete, the foundation is laid, and the architecture of your influence awaits your construction. Now go and build something magnificent.